Welcome to Poetics, the podcast where poetry breaks free from the page and runs wild through your heart. My name is Tamarah Rockwood. I am coming at you from the beautiful Bainbridge Island, where the sea whispers secrets and the trees write their own verses in the wind. By day, my husband Ben and I run Bainbridge Island Press, a haven for poets who aren't afraid to rip open their notebooks and to show you what is beating inside. But we've had a revelation. Seeing these words on paper is only half the journey. Poetry needs to be unleashed through the human voice with all its cracks, crescendos, and raw emotion. That is the heartbeat of Poetics. Each episode you will get a front row seat to poets who read their work exactly as they intended it to be experienced. Plus, we will chat about the poetry. We will analyze it. Why is this relevant? Why do we need this in our world? Why did Bainbridge Island Press publish this poetry? This is poetry that we have published. There are worlds flipped upside down. There is a perfect stanza. There's a devastating line break. Because great poetry isn't just something you read. It is something that reads you right back. So we will dive into the weird, the wonderful, the hilarious, the heartbreaking. Whether you are a poetry professor or someone who hasn't read a poem since high school, this is your invitation to the coolest poetry party around. And today, we are exploring those magical thin spaces, those liminal places where poetry truly lives. In Celtic mythology, these are the gossamer thin veils between our world and the realm of the fairies. And poets? They're the ones who take the fingers and gently pull at those edges just enough so we can peek through and glimpse into this other reality. Today we are going to be listening to Carla Sarett's work. She creates this kind of liminal magic, brilliantly contrasting ethereal worlds against stark, mundane settings. Her poems are juxtaposing the transcendent with the everyday, creating these poignant tensions that just make us catch our breath. What strikes me most are the surprising elements that catch us off guard. Unexpected self-revelations, blunt pragmatism, where we expect nurturing and prophetic endings that transform specific moments into universal truths about the human experience. So, grab your favorite drink, find your comfy spot, and tune those ears to maximum reception. It is time to discover how ancient this art form is, and yet how explosively, perfectly now it can be. What is the thin space between reality and fantasy? It's the transformation. It's where it happens, where ordinary moments reveal their hidden depths, and where poets invite us to see the world with entirely new eyes. Welcome to Poetics Podcast. So before we hear the poem, we want to get to know the author just a little bit. It's debatable. It really is. It's a debatable issue of should you read the poem fresh? Should you know anything about the poet? So that when you read the poem, it's fresh, it's clear, it's new, there's nothing that you are bringing to it besides yourself. And there are different critical theories on reading. I will say that when I don't really remember, I think I was 25, I might have been 24, but I actually had been accepted into a master's program at the university. They renamed it after I graduated. It used to be the University of Hayward in California. And now I think it's Cal State East Bay, which makes more sense. It's a wonderful university, and I still remember my classes and what we talked about. It was transformative. If you are in the Bay Area, I would highly suggest attending there. It's a wonderful university. But, oh man, what was I saying? I'm going to have to pause this and remember, because I got so excited about it. I did. I had to go back and remember what I was saying because I got so excited. It was really great. But I like all the university I've been to. Okay, what I was saying is I got accepted into a master's program for literature, and I only took one class. I did wonderful in the class. Everything was fine. But it was a critical theory class, and it was the nerdiest thing I had been in at that point in my life. And it was an extension. I mean, when you're in your bachelor's for literature, you're talking about the books. You are analyzing how are they written, why are they written, what is the purpose between the characters, writing essays, etc. But in the master's program, you want to understand the craft of how it's written. And so critical theory is also an analysis of how it's read, which is so cool. I still like it. But the way that you break it down is there are different lenses from which you can read. So you can read a book through a feminist lens. How is the book, how's the narrative treating the female characters? How are the female characters responding to the narrative? And a bunch of other things. There's okay, granted, this was like 20-something years ago, so I don't remember all of it, but there was another one where you analyze the economics. Follow the money. That one was always fun, because there is always money in stories. Who has the money? Who is getting the money? Where's the money going? That tells a story, and that is a lens through which you can do. There's another one that is a historical lens. How does this shape the time in history? But there's also reader's response, which is the reader is coming to the text, and the reader is coming with their own tool bag of life experiences. And this is really interesting to me because on one hand, you could simplify it and just say the audience is coming to the book or to the poem, and they're reading it from their experience. So if they were raised in rural Louisiana, they're going to be reading Gone with the Wind from a different perspective than someone who was raised in rural Montana is going to read it. It's going to be a different experience. That's something that is actually very important, and I wrote an entire essay on it at Harvard, and I think it was the name of the essay was, and I got an A on it, it was great, Am I an Idiot? Coming to a text from a different point of view. There's a million rabbit holes or rabbit trails I'm going down, I understand, but this is a perspective of when you come to a piece and you're like, I have never seen this before, and so sometimes your response to the piece is, this is a very intelligent piece, and I don't know what they're saying. Am I an idiot? That is a valid question. That is a valid question. And if you Google the word idiot, it comes up in a lot of intellectual studies and peer-reviewed papers. There are a number of books called titled The Idiot. Recently, in the past, I believe it was Dostoevsky. It's constantly questioning, I'm reading this, what does it mean? And reader response is part of that journey of, I read this, there's something in it that is different. What does it mean? And I know that for a lot of people in the entire history of the human race, poetry has been a very difficult, a very complicated, a very intimidating form to approach, because it is using language in a way that is different than communicating, is different than writing an essay. It is different than filling out a form. There's the use of figurative language that is reaching into us and pulling out these truths of feeling, these truths of experiences, and then presenting them in a way that is unexpected. Is grief a stone? Is our love a red, red rose? This is what poetry is forcing us to do, is to expand how we feel into something that we know. It's a wonderful, complicated, probably intimidating, but beautiful and necessary form. So I hope that when I see these beautiful poems and we're explaining them, that these can be friendly conversations where I want you to read this poem. I want you to read the whole chapbook, because it is telling us something. So I want to tell you something. That's what I was getting at the very beginning, is the critical theory. Should you know the biography of the author? See, I'm getting around to it. I'm not getting totally off track. And that is a question. Should the audience come just completely fresh and just read the poem for themselves with their own tool bag, or should you know something about the author and you're like, oh, I can see this because she has lived these experiences? That being said, I'm going to tell you about Carla Sarett, because she's wonderful and she has a lot of writing that, please look her up. Her name is Carla Sarett. She's our Express chapbooks. That's where her work is, and you can find it there. Anyways, Carla Sarett is the author of quite a few books. She has a book that is titled She Has Visions. They're poems from Main Street Rag Press. She has 2 novels, which is so impressive. The Looking Glass by POETICS Press, and A Closet Feminist by Unsolicited Press. Her works have been rightfully nominated for the Pushcart Prize, Sundress Anthology, Best of the Net, Best American Essays. Her poems have been published in Blue Unicorn, One Art, Harpy Hybrid, elsewhere, Bainbridge Island Press. She also has a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. She lives on the West Coast in California, and if you want, she's available for workshops, ratings, and consultations. You should check her out. So, that being said, we are going to listen to her read her poem, After Swan Lake.
After Swan Lake. My train is packed with swans. They glitter in sequins, white lace skirts, and white wings, and pink tights. The swans are moaning, sobbing over their tiny sorrows. Their mothers stroke them, but it's not working. How could it, when the prince left the White Swan? The afternoon's dancing, the azure backdrop, the illusion of water has come down to this. And next to a rhinestone-crowned swan, her nose is wet. She clings to a Swan Lake purse, a pair of ballet slippers. She's too young for point. An hour ago, she'd seen that perfect white swan fly into the prince's arms for what felt like forever. Why didn't the prince love her? The swan asks me, though I'm not her mother, and I'm the type of swan who mates for life. I look at the young woman who is her mother, dressed in a sheath and glossy pumps. This cost a fortune. I didn't expect her to cry, she says. 10 years from now, or sooner, this little swan will mourn another prince. Her mother won't expect that either.
Oh my gosh. I love so much about this, the complexity and the depth. Do you remember what I was saying earlier about critical theory of there are so many lenses through which you can read a poem or a work? There is money involved. Where is the money going? Who is the money impacting? There is the perspective of the girl. She is young. When she's older, how is this going to look to her? There's the perspective of the narrator. There's this, how are you going, through which lens are you looking at this poem? Here is what I have to say. This poem is a train ride home after a Swan Lake performance, where a young ballet student in costume, they process their emotional response to the tragic ending. The speaker is observing a crying child dancer, questioning why didn't the prince choose the White Swan. Her mother, her pragmatic mother, expresses frustration at the unexpected tears and expensive outing, which I can understand. Just on a side note, the activities for kids is expensive, and it's frustratingly expensive because you, as a parent, you want your children to experience as much as possible, and then there is like a pottery class that lasts for a week and it's $350, and you're just like, we could, but that still, it's $350. Anyways, long story short, I just bought my daughter a potter's wheel, and we're throwing pots on the front porch. That being said, the mother expresses frustration at this unexpected tears. And so these are the perspectives of this event on the train. And then this poem, this very short poem, explores the themes of innocence, of disillusionment, the cyclical nature of romantic disappointment. What I loved about Sarett's poetry was the economy of language. She put more into every single word than you could in an essay. She wrote with precision. She wrote with a scalpel. As soon as I read it, I'm just like, I am so blessed to be able to read this. As a publisher, that was a very, very easy acceptance. I'm so grateful that we're able to get her work into the hands of readers. So, 3 strengths that I was writing down as I was reading this. So, there is the precise, the evocative imagery. So, she has details like rhinestone-crowned swan, wet nose, glossy pumps. These are vivid sensory experiences that are taking the reader into a symbolically, distinguished, or is just symbolically distinguishing this child's costume away from the world of adults' practical concerns. And so that is what I was talking about earlier, the thin line between fantasy and reality, because she's in this costume on the train on the way home. It's a mundane scene, but the child is not dressed for that scene. And so that is part of allowing the objects to tell the story, which I will get in. That's a huge conversation. There's also a layered narrative voice. So the speaker is serving as both the observer and the participant, creating this intimacy while maintaining a distance to kind of grow wisdom about life's patterns of romantic disappointment. And so finally, it's the wonderful blend of fantasy and reality. It's not even a blend, it's that thin space, that thin liminal space. And it is contrasting the ethereal ballet world with words like the azure backdrop, the illusion of water, with a mundane train setting, creating this tension between artistic transcendence and everyday life. There were some surprising elements of the speaker's self-identification, like who is the narrator. This is a very formal poem. There is a very strict form, and I love it so much. The line, "I'm the type of swan who mates for life." It is revealing the speaker's own romantic philosophy. That is the lens through which they are seeing this. It is adding a personal stake to the observation. The mother's blunt pragmatism. She is focusing on the cost and inconvenience rather than her daughter's emotional experience. And this is creating this surprising emotional distance in what should be a nurturing moment. The prophetic ending. So this is the child will mourn another prince. And this transforms this moment on the train into a larger universal statement about repeated heartbreak. And all of a sudden this poem has this larger scope. So with the form, it is free verse with irregular line lengths, but form, I will say this a million times, form represents function. And the form must reflect what the poem needs to say. So when you read this in Express, when you find this chapbook, you will see that it is a very tight poem on the page. This mirrors the emotional rhythm of the scene. They have long flowing lines. It contrasts with shorter fragmented lines like "Her nose is wet." Longer lines are going to allow the reader to go through a journey on one line. When you have shorter fragmented observations like "Her nose is wet," you have a short moment where you are forced to acknowledge that one thing. When you're reading poetry, the length of the lines make a big difference. Every single line is its own life. Every single line lives on its own. Every word is a heartbeat. I couldn't talk more about it now because I'm like, if you want to have a beer, we can talk about it. It should be in poetry classes. But the way that she utilizes this form in her poem is beautiful because it is forcing the reader to see what she wants you to see. And that's what she is set to do in this very short poem. There is enjambment throughout. Enjambment means the line doesn't end at the end of the line, it wraps around to the next line. That's what enjambment means. There's enjambment throughout, and it creates this sense of continuous motion. It is like the train. There are internal rhymes and alliteration. There's swans, sobbing, sorrows. It creates subtle musicality that echoes the ballet's inherent lyricism. I think that what is so fascinating for me, I have overanalyzed this poem because I love it. it portrays this childhood of emotional intensity and adults' tendency to minimize these feelings. This child's genuine grief over fictional heartbreak, and it's representing the authentic emotional development, and the mother has a dismissive response. And this poem is suggesting how society often invalidates this person's psychological experiences. The poem is illuminating this intergenerational difference in emotional processing, and it's hinting at how early dismissal of feelings might contribute to future relationship patterns. This poem, it masterfully captures that moment. It is when art is colliding with life, when a child first encounters the reality that love does not always triumph. It is speaking of the experience of young women learning about romantic disappointment through cultural narratives, through ballet. We are learning it through poetry. While the mother's response represents society's discomfort with feminine emotional expression. The poem's genius, I believe, lies in its recognition that Swan Lake serves as a kind of cultural initiation into the inevitability of romantic loss, and the child is not just crying about ballet, but she is processing her first lesson on how love stories might end, and the final prediction creates a devastating cycle where art teaches life, which then repeats as art's tragedies. I love the depth of this poem. It's really beautiful. I can't thank Carla enough for allowing us, for trusting us to publish this for her. I'm so grateful that she read it for the podcast so that you could hear how it sounds from her. It is available on BainbridgeIslandPress.com. You have to buy it today. Go to BainbridgeIslandPress.com. You have to buy her chapbook today. I'm sorry. It's mandatory. You just have to. Okay. I'm going to go take a walk because this was an intense poem and I know you're all going to love it. I know you have loved it. So, that is all for today. If you have enjoyed diving into the world of verse with us, please join us next time. We've got more poets to meet, more poems to explore, and more literary adventures to share. Until then, keep reading, keep writing, keep poetry close to your heart. Thank you for joining Poetics Podcast, where we bring poetry to life one verse at a time.